You're listening to the Talking Headways Podcast Network.
Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on. Talking Mondays. Keep moving on. Keep moving on. Talking Mondays. Keep moving on.
Happy Monday. This is Mondays at the Overhead Wire, sponsored by our super generous Patreon supporters. I'm Jeff Wood, your host, and joined by Han Solo. That's right, every Wookiee's favorite right-hand man is here to share the news from the last few weeks. And so this week, again, I don't know what it is. I guess with Juneteenth and then the 4th of July, and then there's like all these weird holidays they're getting in the middle of the summer now. Not that they're weird or anything. It's just like they're making the timeline weird for recording shows. So I find myself with like a week's worth of articles versus 2 weeks worth of articles, but I feel like I need to record some Monday shows every other week. I'm trying to make it work, and we're getting it there and happening. And actually right now, I was just writing the newsletter, and I feel like I'm having an epiphany, and then it disappears, and I'm feeling I'm having an epiphany and it disappears, and I'm just kind of annoyed with my writing right now. And it's funny, I sit down to write the newsletter introduction, and sometimes I'm like, okay, let's keep it short today, and then I start writing, and then it ends up being like 10 paragraphs. Let's keep it short. That's what today feels like, is like I had two things that I was like, okay, these two things go together. I should put these together, and then it made me write this whole longer thing, and it made me construct my thoughts and deconstruct my thoughts and pull it back together again and see if it made sense and all those things. And so right now I really hate my writing. I'm not really a writer either. It's funny because one of the things that I've kind of always been told is that I'm not really a writer. And I don't know if I necessarily like believe that myself. I believe I'm an idea connector, not really a writer. And so writing has never really been one of my strong suits. I'm more of like a visual and even an audio person, where I like to put together maps. I like to but I'm not like an artist, and I'm not really good with the drawing things or anything like that. But aesthetics, I guess, are something that I really seem to be doing better about, or, putting things on the wall like that look coherent or things like that. But when you want me to write some words and put the words together, that makes it harder. I think I've been told my style is conversational, and that's not really a writing style, but maybe it is now with bloggers and stuff. I mean, I've been blogging since 2006 or so, but my blogs have never really taken off in the way that I'm not a Henry Grabar or a Connor Doherty, where if you read their stuff, it's really good writing. You can pull stuff together. I mean, authors that put stuff together in good writing are top notch, and there's a reason why they're writers, and there's a reason why I'm a podcaster and a newsletter creator, and I like to aggregate stuff. I like to pull stuff together. I like to make connections. But writing has always been a struggle for me, and I don't know why exactly. Maybe it was just education, or maybe it's the way I look at words, or maybe I don't know what it is. But anyways, I try to put coherent thoughts down, like on my Substack, in my intros to the newsletters and stuff like that. But sometimes it feels like, if I'm reading it back to myself, it doesn't feel right, and it annoys the heck out of me. But in any event, that's the intro to the Monday show. But let me know if you all feel the same way. Are you all good writers? Are you bad writers? Do you hate writing, technical writing? Is the work that you do kind of annoying from that perspective? I'd love to hear folks and how they feel about their own work, and how they share it with the world. So as we do when we're Han Solo, we share some Talking Headways podcasts that have been on the feed, as well as stuff coming up soon. I have a couple this week. I've been planning some and trying to get some folks on the line. So I have these planned several weeks out, but from time to time there are lulls and things like that. So last week, Adit Homer was on the show again to talk with us about his team's idea for a transportation-based block grant that should replace formula funding from the federal government. And I highly recommend listening to this one from last week. If you didn't, you really need to, especially if you're in the funding fight for transit monies and things like that. We have all the funding we need for cities and regions, but it's stuck at state DOTs. Basically, he stated that localities make 34% of the VMT out there, but they only get something like 14% of the funding back from the federal government. So that means all that money all that money goes to the state DOT, which means that local roads are neglected, local priorities are somewhat neglected, transit, bike lanes, all those things. And the gap is huge. And Adi mentioned in the podcast, he even said that LA should be getting like $300 million more per year for local transportation needs. And you wonder where that $300 million is going. It's probably going to a lot of these highway expansions and things like that don't necessarily need to be constructed. Same thing for the rest of the state of California. Same thing for Texas. Same thing for all over the United States. A lot of regions are producing a lot of EMT, and that's how you get the formula funds. I don't believe that. Whether that's the right way to go about it or not. This is based on gas tax. This is based on other funding sources, but you only get like a little bit of the funding back. So, that's a lot of money that we're missing out on. That's a lot of money. We're arguing with states about this, about whether, what funding we need to get to keep our transit systems running in places like Illinois and like Pennsylvania and California. And, maybe we didn't realize that a lot of the money that should be coming back to us from the federal government should be going to regions instead of the state DOTs. So anyways, listen to that episode. It's really great. Adi really walks us through it all, and really a rallying cry for getting more funding for active transportation. David Prythurch will be back on the show. He'll talk about his book, Reclaiming the Road, with lots of great examples from the pandemic about rethinking how we use streets and how that means more, what justice means and things like that. We really, really highly recommend that one. Carol Martins is going to be back on the show. One of my favorite podcast episodes ever was with Carol talking about the philosophy of transport justice. And we had another great discussion about measuring transportation success. And it's one of the first times I feel like, or one of the few times I feel like, where he was like, well, I set out to do this research and then it told me something completely different than I expected. And so we went with it. And so I think that's really interesting. So I'm really excited for you all to listen to that one. And also I have lots of other, stuff in the hopper planned as well. We've got a few episodes that I'm going to be recording soon. Folks from CNT are coming on the show, Center for New Technology. I have plans for stuff going into July. I even have stuff planned in October and November. So we've got a lot of shows coming up after the summer that are too far off really to talk about, but there's a lot of stuff that I'm working on in getting people on the show. So really excited to share those with you when they come out. But those three highly recommend when they come out fairly soon. David Prythurch will be out this Thursday, and I think Carol Martin's show will be out the week after that. Okay, well, thanks to everybody who's ordered Bus and Bike scarves. I'd like to order, if you'd like to order one, if I'd like to order, if you would, just head on over to theoverheadwire.com or email me at theoverheadwire@gmail.com. I got an order from Australia. That's awesome. Sent it out the other day. Made a deal on shipping, and if you're in another country, I know there's like this whole tariff thing. I don't know if my scarves get tariffed or not by other countries, but if you want one, let me know. Send me an email, theoverheadwire@gmail.com, and we'll see if we can get you one in any part of the United States or Canada, or I've sent them to Canada before. Just a little bit more shipping there, and then Australia, that's a lot more shipping. But if you want it anywhere in the world, I'll try to figure out if I can send it to you. There's certain parts of the world that probably can't send it to you at the moment if you're interested, but for the most part, I can probably get it to you somehow, some way. So the bike-only knit scarves are back in stock, so get one of those if you get a chance. And as we always note, we like to thank everybody for supporting the show, whether that's on Patreon, patreon.com/theoverheadwire, or if you buy books off the bookshop site. You can support the show by going to our store and searching and ordering any book you want. It really helps us out. I appreciate folks that have been doing that. Bookshop.org/shop/theoverheadwire. Also ordering our Cars Are Cholesterol t-shirts and merch. You can go to TeePublic to do that, bit.ly/Cars Are Cholesterol. Thanks again, as always, to Richard Wazensky for designing that. You can find him on Instagram at Dick David Sketches. Always great to think about that collaboration where we made that wonderful, wonderful Cars Are Cholesterol image, which I have on stickers, which I send out to Patreon supporters when you all sign up for $2 a month. And a lot of you have been signing up, and I think part of the reason why is because we've now made the Patreon feed for the podcast ad-free. So no ads except for this one that you're hearing right now from my personal ads, but no outside ads if you become a Patreon member. $1, $2. If you go the $2 route, you get stickers, a handwritten note, a really cool train station stamp. If you want to go to $10, you can get one of our bus or bike only scarves as part of the deal. So, but also now I'm posting a lot of those intros from the newsletter on Patreon. I'm also, putting the podcast up there, maybe even a little bit earlier than I do on the regular feed too. So if I'm posting the podcast and for numbers reasons, usually I wait till about 9:00 Pacific on Wednesday night to post the podcast. And sometimes I'm still working on it until 10 or 11. But if I get it done early in the day, maybe like 3 or 4 or 5 in the afternoon, I'll post it early. So extra bonus early podcast on the Patreon feed sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes. And I think I owe folks a bonus episode or here or there. It's sitting on my desktop and I haven't yet edited it, but I have another bonus episode coming. So I know that I promised that maybe a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago or so, but I still have it and I'm working on that too. Apologies if stuff just gets in the way or time flies by. We also strongly suggest that folks sign up for the newsletter. That is the way that we support our work, mostly is through the newsletter. So all the subscriptions from the folks that subscribe there are, benefit this podcast as well. I mean, the Patreon support, the funding through all the little, sales and things like that really helps. But the bulk of our funding for my job basically comes through the newsletter. So we've been doing that for almost 20 years, and we are really excited that people keep reading it, that we can keep collecting and I can keep, pulling it together and make this my job. I can't really believe I never set out to create a media company. I just was a humble planner, working on maps and data analysis for my old nonprofit. But here we are sharing news and information, and I really appreciate all for listening. Okay, this is episode 175. We're live and in session. Before we get to the show, I want to let everybody know who already knows already because you're on this podcast. I don't necessarily advertise this one as much as Talking Headways, but you can find your podcasts on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Overcast, Pocket Casts, and of course, Apple Podcasts. Thanks to everybody who subscribes through podcatchers. I'm sure that you're listening now on a podcatcher if you're listening to this show, unless you're listening to it on our website. And so, or maybe I'll post it this week. Maybe I'll get around to posting it this week. Social media. I know it's part of my job, but it's getting so draining, that social media. Also, if you feel inclined, leave us a review on iTunes or find us on any of the social sites where the podcast appears, including LinkedIn or Blue Sky. Okay, so here's what you all are here for. The news, news items that were popular in our newsletter, the Overhead Wire Daily, as well as some bonus items that I thought were interesting. So again, since it was the 4th of July, since we didn't, have 2 full weeks of news items, I have 1 week of interesting stuff and another week of bonus items that I thought were interesting, but didn't necessarily get summarized at the end of the week because we had 4th of July. So first up, do we really need more highways? In a new book, University of Pennsylvania professor Eric Guerra makes the case that the continued expansion of highways in the United States is exacerbating the errors made when they were first constructed through neighborhoods and communities. He argues that since we've overbuilt, there will be a need to decommission roads, and as travel behaviors adjust, new solutions will become viable. This was an interview conducted by our friend David Zipper in Bloomberg CityLab. Also, David got into like a really big thing about free buses, free transit over the last few weeks in his article in Slate. And I should note to folks that David's written a number of these articles before, 4 or 5 of them. We'll get to that in a bit. But anyways, so Eric Guerra wrote a book, and it's by Island Press. I got a PDF copy, so I'm going to look into that, and maybe we'll have Eric on. But David did a great discussion with him about kind of his book and the ideas behind it. Eric's been really great lately doing research about whether we're overbuilt roads, and has come to some interesting conclusions saying yes, we have. And that's kind of like to a certain extent what we talked about with the D last week as well, in that we've built out the interstate highway system. And so there's got to be a better way to support our transportation systems in cities. And Eric kind of makes the case that we're spending all this money to build more extensions and build more expansions when really it's not necessarily needed. And we're actually, making or degrading the experience overall because of it. So really interesting, interview with David. I highly recommend people go check it out. Again, as usual, all these, items will be linked in the show notes as we do. So go check that out if you get a chance. Next up, no zoning in Charlottesville, Virginia. A judge has ruled that Charlottesville's recently adopted zoning code is invalid after a firm representing the city missed a filing deadline. Because lawmakers had to repeal the old code to enact the new one, no zoning code exists for the city at this time. The city expects to vote again soon on a code, but in the meantime, they will pause rezoning requests by not issuing building permits. This was by Aaron O'Hare and Jesse Higgins in Charlottesville Tomorrow. This one created a lot of interest because just like, oh no, city doesn't have a zoning code. But they still have state building codes and they still have building rules and regulations. It just doesn't have zoning, and they're not even going to approve any zoning requests, rezoning requests, because they don't have a code. And so I guess they're going to try to redo the vote on this in about a month or so, the nearest possible time when they can do it, so it gets back on there, and then I guess they'll get sued again and we'll go through the whole process again. But the whole reason this happened is because the lawyer that was representing the city missed their deadline to give the judge some information or something like that, so it got invalidated because of that, which made the NIMBYs really happy. But at the same time, it's just kind of a silly kind of paperwork error that can be fixed, but in the meantime they don't have a zoning code. Which might be okay, in the long run. Maybe they just not have a zoning code. Maybe they just have all the building codes, all the fire codes and safety codes and all that stuff you need, but just don't have a zoning code. Just have rules against, some uses that aren't allowed in some neighborhoods or something like that. But other than that, like, why do you need to say whether somebody can work out of their home or whether there should be a corner coffee shop or things like that, or whether they should actually be allowed to build a 5 or 6 or 7 story building? It's funny. I keep going back to this, and this was mentioned in one of the books we read recently, or I think it was Nolan Gray. But basically, I read this book back in like the early 2000s called Zoned Out, and it was by an author that we've had on this show. Actually, it was on with Greg Schill recently. Editor's note, that was Jonathan Levine. And I told him how much I loved his book, and now I can't remember his name for some reason. I think it's just the end of the day kind of thing, and I'm still frustrated by that article I'm trying to write. But anyways, what was interesting about it was that he was talking about the difference between like San Jose and Greece. And San Jose has a really strict zoning code. The houses, once they get to a certain point, you can't build more, you can't build up. They are restricted by the zoning about what you could build. So they're just single family homes, and a lot of them are like really trashy single family homes that you only can have one story on. And, the prices just keep going up, but the property on the land just stays the same. And so you get more, you pay more money and you get less, property for what you're buying. But in Greece, what he was talking about was basically that, you could build up to the next level whenever you built a single family home, and then you had more family, and then the family lived in the, intergenerational living. And so the family was like, oh, we need another room, so we're going to build another story on our house. And so you have all these housing units that have been built up and up and up over time. And so this gradual increase in density based on the need of the family, made it viable for people to live in the same place. And all they had to do was basically, pay out the cost of construction instead of paying for a whole nother piece of land, paying for the zoning code to restrict them from buying or building somewhere else. And so that was really interesting to think about that. And I've been thinking about that ever since. And I think probably a lot of the EMB movement has been thinking about that since too. And I know it was mentioned in Nolan's book, but that's just really interesting kind of way of thinking about zoning codes. And especially in this Charlottesville example, like, do we really need a zoning code? Should it just be allowed to build up and up and up based on the need? It doesn't necessarily mean you want to build a 30-story building in a single-family neighborhood, but maybe you want to build a 2-story or a 3-story or a 4-flat or whatever it is. Missing middle housing, those are the things that I restricted these days. And I think the zoning code was updated to be more progressive in that way, but still, the idea of no zoning has some, in the way that Houston does it, in a way, has some good ideas about it. I don't know. So just an interesting way to think about it. Okay, how Salt Lake lost control of street design. During this year's legislative session, the state of Utah took away Salt Lake City's autonomy on designing streets for better safety. The bill, which was snuck into the last minute and reportedly initially fooled Democrats, was supported by an AI-generated paper from 2 professors at the University of Utah working in their own time. Even though the paper was riddled with factual errors about traffic safety and street design, opponents of the city's autonomy used it to pass a preemptive bill that stymied the city's authority over key policies and infrastructure. This was by Taylor Anderson in Building Salt Lake. This is such a great article, and Taylor did such a great job of explaining this. But basically, there were these 2 professors who, on their own time, as Alessandra Rigolone, who is at the University of Utah, also in the planning department, basically said that they were on their own time. And what happened was they wrote this paper 75% using 75% AI. It was they did an AI generator over this paper. They found whoever found it, and the person who got it passed said that they never talked about it before they passed the law. But then an open records request found out that they did. It was getting passed around. And so they used this paper factual with inaccuracies about, speed humps and things like that to allow the state to preempt the city of Salt Lake from, doing anything that would restrict car movement. This state preemption thing is going around in places like Texas and Phoenix and in Arizona and Idaho and places like that. And this is just another example. And so basically, the state DOT has to sign off on any road diets or things like that in the city because of this paper that was riddled with inaccuracies, which wasn't even true. Even people around the city were wondering, were scratching their heads, wondering what's going on with this thing. So they basically got this passed. The city doesn't have as much control as it used to on street design, and I still don't understand why the conservative movement is so turn traffic safety like this into a culture war thing, because that's what they're doing in all these states, and it doesn't make any sense because we know from the data and from the information that we get from all the research that traffic safety and slow speeds and road diets and all that stuff work. It slows people down. It keeps people from dying. Again, we have this traffic safety problem in the United States, and it really, really shouldn't be a culture war thing. But it turns out at some of these state legislatures that it becomes that, which is really frustrating. Transit important to the justice system. A survey of jurors in Philadelphia found that 40% of them showed up to the courthouse by transit over a 5-day period in May. The findings point to the importance of transportation access to the courts and another reason for Pennsylvania to fund SEPTA with support from the Philadelphia Bar Association. Furthermore, access issues don't just apply to actions at the courthouse. They also have implications for court-mandated duties, including diversion programs and community service. This was by Kadiyun I. Jafari, who was is the head of the Philadelphia Bar Association at the moment. In city and state Pennsylvania is the news outlet. This was something I've said this many times, but I was on the board of the University Transportation Center in New Orleans, which was the Center for Transorient Communities, which had federal funding and was canceled by the Secretary of Transportation for being, and literally they said this in the press release that it was too woke, that the program was too woke. Well, the woke article that was going to be written, or the woke research that was going to be done that I reviewed before the program was unceremoniously cut, was another piece of research in a certain city on access to the courts by jurors, by people, by judges, by anybody who wanted to get into the court system. And so a lot of folks who are going and becoming jurors and whatever else, they might be penalized for not going, but they have this lifeline access in transit systems. And so studying that is really important. So they are going to do that research. Hopefully, I'm hoping that they can do that research without the funding from the UTC money. But this, basically research, or this, data collection by the Philadelphia Bar Association gets to the same question that they were trying to answer. Is that it's really important to the justice system that we have people able to show up to be jurors, to be your jury of peers at the courts, and also for people to get to the things that they are mandated to do. So the community service. So if a judge says you are, guilty of this, you are supposed to, perform community service. If somebody can't perform their community service because they can't get there, that's a frustrating thing, right? So I think this is really important to share and to say, and it's one of those other things that, like healthcare and like anything else that we talk about on the show, where everything's connected, and the benefits of transit are far-reaching. And last up in this, or in the news items that were the most read, human impacts on animal evolution. New research shows that human culture, including politics, religion, and war, have influenced the evolution of wildlife in cities. The genetic structures of wildlife populations are sometimes profoundly altered because of our social worlds. Our social worlds are intertwined with the surrounding ecology. The researchers found that zoning codes and policing, for example, impact animal territories and their behaviors. This was by Marcos Magana in the Los Angeles Times. The research paper, really interesting stuff shared here about how when we, create certain situations like zoning, for example, animals actually follow that because the zoning actually creates physical barriers sometimes. So, for example, and also the road building, for example, like there's the whole story of the pumas that are stuck on certain islands of genetic inferiority in Los Angeles because they can't get to the other side to mate with other pumas, mountain lions, because they have to cross a highway. And so when they cross the highway, they get hit by cars and are killed. And then the genetic makeup of that place becomes even worse because they can't, expand their territories. So, they found actually coyotes don't go into richer neighborhoods because they're more likely to get shot or killed or taken away. They're more likely to go into poor neighborhoods because people are more forgiving. They're like, oh, that's a coyote. They're not bothering me. I'm not bothering them. And so it's really interesting how our social structures, how war, how zoning, how politics has influenced the genetics of these wildlife populations. And over time, it's changed it really, really quickly. So really interesting item in the Los Angeles Times. Okay, here we are, bonus items. A New York City pilot program would allow tenants to report on-time rental payments to major credit bureaus in order to boost credit scores. Credit scores are often the determinant in whether people are able to get lower rates for loans, and renters typically have less opportunities to build up their history. This was in the Brooklyn Reader. So this is a really important piece because we've talked about this a number of times before. But credit scores are often determined by whether you are borrowing money or not. And if you're not borrowing money, or if you're on time for your payments for the electricity bill, or you're on time for your payments for rent, or whatever else it is, you don't get credit for that on your credit score. And so renters have a hard time gaining credit to get access to a new apartment, or get access to the ability to be signed off for a new apartment or for credit for something else. So other ways to create credit scores is actually a beneficial thing. And it's really interesting that the New York City is actually working on this, because I feel like this is something that's something that should be done in more places and give people a chance to get into the system that the rich people are already in, right? The rich people are in the credit system because they're spending money, they're borrowing money, the richer people, I should say. But if you're living paycheck to paycheck, but if you're making your payments on time and you're paying your electric bill, you're paying your rent and things like that, that doesn't get into the system. So I think it's really important to, basically, give them the same level of access to the system that's created to, basically run capitalism that everybody else is, and give them equal access to the things that, make their lives easier, like housing. Improving the city for mothers is likely to create better experiences for everyone else in the city. Wider sidewalks, heat-mitigated playgrounds, and more accessible transportation would benefit moms and those taking care of others. This was in Architectural Digest. Interesting article. I highly recommend folks go and read that one. Obviously, caretakers and the care infrastructure that exists. Sometimes we don't design our cities that benefit those folks who are in those places where they are caring for other people. So this one is a longer one. This is a piece that I wrote for my intro for the newsletter, but I was talking about basically there's an article in CNN where a young person was talking about how basically they saw other kids in the Netherlands feeling more free than they felt, as free as they felt when they were kids, but they don't feel like kids these days in the United States feel as like they have the freedom that they they have in the Netherlands because of their ability to be safe when they're out walking and biking. So I just wrote this piece, and I hope you all appreciate it. When I was younger, I walked to school starting in the 3rd grade in California. Then after I moved to Texas, I biked around the neighborhood and went to the pool in the summer with my friends by ourselves. One of my favorite things was riding to the baseball card shop just 15 minutes by bike from my house without having to cross a major road. Nowadays, you'd be hard-pressed to find the same freedom in the days of many children, except perhaps if they live in the countries like the Netherlands. According to UNICEF, Dutch kids are the happiest in the world. Why? In part because they can come and go as they please on their feet or by bike. Yet, as the CNN article notes, 84% of American parents want their children to have more freedom, but in the end, they are concerned about their safety. I want my daughter to have the amount of freedom I had as a kid, but if I'm being honest, the bigger fear I have isn't strangers, it's cars. Here in San Francisco, I imagine I will be less worried about than some suburb, but there's still a lot of potential for danger. Which makes me somewhat envious of our friends like Chris and Melissa Bruntlett, who moved to the Netherlands and shared in our discussion with them in 2021 that they became more free as parents as their kids became more autonomous because of the culture of biking and walking. Chris noted, quote, "And it's only by flipping that script and giving children an independent way to get from A to B do we liberate them and liberate parents from this chauffeur role that has been thwarted upon them." Many often think of freedom as being able to get around much faster and with somewhat less friction in a car, but can also chain us to a life as a taxi driver and impact the development of our kids. I appreciated my mom and dad shuffling me to soccer games and Boy Scouts, but I also loved my freedom to move about the neighborhood on my bike in the summer and on the weekends. I imagine my parents appreciated that too. As a parent of a young kid who needs attention quite constantly, and 3-year-olds are different than 15-year-olds, I know. But yeah, it would be nice to have a little bit more freedom, right? You wouldn't have to be a chauffeur. You wouldn't have to ferry people from place to place. I totally love that my mom and dad took me to like soccer practice and Boy Scouts and all that stuff in the car. But at the same time, it would have been nice to be a little bit more free. Now, my dad was a scout leader, one of the adult leaders in the troop, so it was good that he went. But it would have been good to maybe ride my bike to soccer practice or something. I mean, we gave my mom some more free time. She was busy. She got stuff to do. So anyways, I wanted to write that out and kind of share that. Texas has outlawed the use of paper license plates and now requires metal plates to be issued upon sale at dealerships. Paper plates are easily counterfeited around the country, and an expose in Streetsblog revealed that how the tags were made, the reasons why, skirting tolls and fees, and how some folks were fighting back. This is in Jalopnik and Streetsblog. A number of months ago, a year ago or so, Streetsblog had a really good expose on those tags, and now they're not allowed in Texas. Maybe more places should do that as well. After a landlord tried to raise rents in LA Chinatown building during the pandemic, in some cases almost 200% after restrictive covenants had expired, the residents then went on a rent strike for 5 years that they have settled, only having to pay 9 months of rent for the time they missed over a 10-year period, with their rent staying at the same rate. This is by LA Public Press. So the city of Los Angeles stepped in, and I think they funded some of the rent, but the 200% increase is crazy, and they did a rent strike, and now they don't have to pay for a couple of years of rent because that would have been an insane increase, and the restrictive covenants expired, and I guess that's legal, but at the same time, it seems very scammy by that landlord. Should just sell the building, honestly. Researchers have found a way to reduce shipping emissions by half by turning carbon dioxide into bicarbonates that can be released back into the ocean during a journey. This is in Anthropocene Magazine. So it's really cool. Basically, the exhaust goes into like this room with salt water. It mixes. The salt water attaches the bicarbonates, or it changes the CO2 into bicarbonate by attaching some of the particles, and then basically it runs it over limestone so that it actually turns into a solid. And so you can actually take carbon dioxide and turn it into bicarbonates inside of the ship as it's moving, and so you can get rid of half the emissions. They actually tried this and it worked. So it'd be amazing if we could get rid of half of shipping emissions this way. Shipping is like 6 or 8%, I think, of the emissions around the world. Don't quote me on that specifically, but it's a lot, and it's pretty dirty. It's a pretty dirty, the bunker oil and all that stuff is pretty dirty transportation emissions thing going on. Okay, the next up is, I'm not gonna, I wrote this down, but I don't know. Should I talk about this? Maybe I should. This is another thing I wrote about what happened in Texas with the floods. So I'll say this. I didn't mention this yesterday, perhaps because I was still in shock, but the tragedy on the Guadalupe River continues to sit heavy on my mind. Most summers when I was in middle school and high school, I went to summer camp somewhere in Texas with my Boy Scout troop. I went to Possum Kingdom Lake in North Texas, Buffalo Trails in West Texas, and a few times to El Rancho Sima in Central Texas along the Blanco River in Hays County. I still have a scar on my knee from running and falling on the concrete dam that crosses the Blanco. That was in the 1990s, but in 2015, a massive flood event wiped out El Rancho Sima, forcing it to permanently close as a scout camp. It is now preserved as a public park by the Nature Conservancy. It's scary to think that during some of the summer rainstorms that took place then, it could have been our tents that were wiped out by a similar event as the Guadalupe and took so many campers' lives. In a podcast episode on water, I shared here many times, I noted the well-known flash flood alley in Central Texas and the storm that took out El Rancho Sima. Quote, but in the Hayes Valley, Texas, the rising elevations of the hill country cause what is called the orographic effect in Texas's own flash flood alley. Weather systems hit hills or mountains and the air rises and precipitation drops fast. In 2015, Hays County was the epicenter for a massive flood event which destroyed many homes and took lives. That same weather system pummeled Houston as well, inundating Buffalo Bayou by raising the water levels from 3 feet to 34 feet in just an 8-hour period. You might say this is what scientists call a 100-year flood. The problem is Houston has had 2 of them in the last 2 decades. I made that episode in 2015, which was 10 years ago. I believe Houston has had a few more 100-year floods since then. And as climate change happens, weather events such as these will happen more often. Weather events will become more extreme as hot air can hold more moisture and drop it faster. This will happen more often and everywhere, even here in San Francisco. A rainstorm that dropped 5 inches in a single day leaked into my basement. I've since fixed the 1890s planter box that allowed that to happen, but we have a lot of work to do on the overall issue of climate change so it doesn't impact us more. It's going to get worse before it gets better, but we will get there. Obviously, there have been setbacks, but the world is moving in the right direction. The reconciliation bill was a blow for sustainable transportation. Bike commuters lost for good an already minuscule tax break of just $250 a year on commuting. Politico Pro reports, and in a SOP for car dealers, car buyers will now be able to write off up to $10,000 a year in loan interest for their new cars. This was in Kiplinger. Hawaii has launched a road user charge for electric vehicles that can travel above 35 miles per hour. In the state, vehicle owners can pay either $50 flat fee or $8 per 1,000 miles, capped at $50. This is in City Magazine, and some fig trees that found in Kenya can take carbon dioxide and turn it into calcium oxalate crystals in the soil. The formation of these rocks keep the CO2 out of the atmosphere. While some trees are already known to sequester 1 ton of carbon over their lifetime, this is the first known instance of fruit trees doing so. This was in Discover Magazine. Kind of similar to what they were doing on the boat, really. Kind of trying to take CO2 and make it into crystals and solid matter. And finally, in an attempt to change perceptions about the company and assuage the fear parents have for their children's safety on roads, Waymo has begun to allow Arizona teens to use the service. This was in Wired Magazine. Now, Kia Wilson wrote a wonderful tweet on this specific topic, discussing she's like, I feel like I'm going crazy, saying that, we constructed this whole built environment that's not safe for kids. We talked about this earlier in the article about the Netherlands. And then, we're selling the safety back to them as Waymo, as a way to get around. And so I think that's frustrating that all these things that should be public are now privatized. I think that's the main way you can say it. And I don't think safety should be privatized. I think it should be a public thing. You should be allowed safety for being in society. And you shouldn't need to buy it. So that's frustrating to me. And I think it's frustrating to a lot of folks. Okay, this week and every week, I want to thank our generous Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome and keep the show going by listening and supporting each month. This show and Talking Headways really wouldn't be here without you, so thank you very much. And you can support the show by going to patreon.com/theoverheadwire. We've had people sign up a lot recently, and I really appreciate that. You can do so for $2 a month, get you some stickers and a handwritten note. $10 a month will get you our bus-only scarf or a bike-only scarf. And if you want to get the podcast ad-free, you can just sign up for $1 a month or any amount. I think $1 is the lowest amount. They don't go into the cents. But if you do $1 a month, you'll get the podcast for free. without for free. You're paying for the Patreon, but you'll get ad free, I should say. So help us out there. Patreon.com/theoverheadwire. Really appreciate it. Listener questions and comments. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to tweet us or the Overhead Wire where the podcast appears. LinkedIn. I think I posted one on Threads recently and it got like 0 clicks or likes. I don't know what's going on at Threads, but I am on Blue Sky and we are on LinkedIn publishing things there. So I do have a question this week, or a couple comments. One comment actually. So really appreciate this one. Hey Jeff, first off, thanks for doing the Overhead Wire. I really appreciate it. I really liked episode 493 on transit to the great outdoors, and it got me thinking about something that has been rattling around in my head for a while. Burn Peak did a video on how Bentonville paved some of their mountain bike trails, and in it, Seth talks about a trail that leads to a middle school. So I have to wonder, by focusing so much on utility, are we sometimes optimizing for the wrong thing? I mean, if we want kids to ride to school, shouldn't we make it fun? If we want people to have regular access to nature, wouldn't it be cool to have optional sections of trail that incorporate some chill berms or rollers, rideable on any bike, nothing extreme, winding through trees? I'm not saying we should replace direct, safe, efficient infrastructure with dirt trails, but rather that we should have options. In Dr. Antonia Lugo's book, Bicycle Race, Transportation, Culture, and Resistance, she criticizes the tendency of U.S. to only ever looking at Europe for inspiration. Maybe the response to the objection of we're not Amsterdam could be, but we could be Bentonville, Arkansas. Would we get more traction by leaning into the outdoorsy, adventurous lifestyle that so many in the U.S. love? I imagine this sort of thing would be easier to pull off in a smaller city, and the actions of the police around Dolores Street Hill Bomb, for example, make me think it wouldn't be necessarily be easy in places like San Francisco, but it would be amazing to see it explored. Anyway, I don't have much of an ask here since I'm sure you have plenty of stuff in the queue. However, if you do ever find yourself talking with someone working on this or something adjacent, I'd love to hear about it. Thanks, Tom. P.S. Advertising that you have a special RSS feed for Patreon supporters is the thing that will finally get me to sign up for it. Thanks, Tom. I appreciate that. I appreciate this piece too. The letter that you wrote me, the email you wrote me. Because I do think that's an important thing, is like we can make it fun. I'm trying to do that. And I mentioned this to Tom in an email that I sent back, and I'm trying to get this Kingwood episode out. It's turning out to be longer than I thought because I'm getting to more in depth. It's the same problem I have with writing that intro article every day, is like I'm trying to corral my thoughts and make sure not to make it too big, but also make it, encompassing, but also try to get the idea across. But basically where I grew up in Kingwood, Texas, there's like 80, 90 miles of greenbelt trails. And these were winding trails that went through the forest. They were behind all the houses. They were made before the subdivisions. So the system existed. It doesn't go along it goes along some roads, but most of the system goes behind the houses, and it's a coherent network that was created before the houses were built. But what it allows people to do is ride their bikes to wherever they want to. And if subdivisions and cities had set themselves up properly beforehand, in this way, we could have the same, bike trails that Bentonville, Arkansas has paved. And so we can have fun, we can go places and then make it fun and make it interesting and make it so that you're not having to sit in the car. And like I did when I was a kid. And, I mentioned my mom and dad earlier, taking me around to different places. I probably could have gone a couple places on my bike, and sometimes maybe it was just a little bit faster in the car, but you could still access a lot of places with those bike trails. And I really, really appreciate growing up in a place that had the access to go to the subway or go to the baseball card shop with my friends or whatever else it is. And for adults, they could go to, not necessarily to work, because work probably was like, 30 miles away in downtown Houston, but you could go to the restaurant. You can go to have your exercise. You could go to the grocery store if you really wanted to and not drive. And so all those accessible things are there if you design it correctly. And so I think we should follow that if we get a chance. And, we should be more like Bentonville, Arkansas, or Kingwood, Texas, or wherever else. We don't have to be all like Amsterdam or San Francisco or Portland, as many people like to complain about. So it's a great email, Tom, and I appreciate that, you sending us that. Puppies and butterflies, the part of the show where we talk about something fun, interesting, or maybe just didn't fit in other sections. So I don't have a puppies and butterflies for this week, but I had somebody actually send in the puppies and butterflies, which is great. So I would like to share this story reported by Greater Washington as a suggestion for a future Puppies and Butterflies segment. And this is from Eric. From Bike Share Beat, ridership spiked in April while Columbia road trips soar, published on May 14th. Elsewhere in the district, one pair of Capital Bike Share riders had a swooning, as first documented in the r Washington, D.C. subreddit. Newlyweds at Moultrie Courthouse relied on Capital Bike Share as their getaway wheels. Congratulations to the happy couple, wishing these anonymous sweethearts a lifetime of love, laughter, and free 45-minute classic rides with an annual membership to Capital Bike Share. And this is a second article. And Greater Washington recently posted an update regarding the it says CABI, which is Capital Bike Share, but it to me as a Californian, it says California Bike or California Bike Coalition. From Bike Share Beat, ridership shifts into headgear with over 690,000 rides, published on June 23rd. Last month, our Bike Share Beat included a shout out to a pair of newlyweds who rode into the sunset on Capital Bike Share, following their elopement at Moultrie Courthouse. Congratulations again. In response, we received a note from a lovely couple, Erica Thames and Mads Ducharme, who took their engagement photos on Capital Bike Share. We wanted to include them in our photo shoot in Malcolm X Park because they are a major part of what made our lives in DC so wonderful and fulfilling, Mads Ducharme said. A reminder to practice proper bike safety so you don't fall, or in the case of these cycling sweethearts, fall in love. Thank you for your podcast and for your time, Eric. Thanks, Eric, for sending these in. That's great. People using bike share, using transit as their getaway vehicles from their wedding. That's awesome, and I love it. I love it so much. It's so great, and that is a perfect Puppies and Butterflies to end the show on. So you can find me on Blue Sky, Mastodon, LinkedIn, Instagram, sometimes Threads, Substack, YouTube, and of course my website, and in your inbox every morning if you sign up for the newsletter. And also I'm at Flickr, on Flickr at Transit Nerds. I've uploaded a couple of Shenzhen pictures for folks there, but I also have a bunch more that I need to attach because they're hidden behind a secretive wall for some reason. I need to fix that, but I'm working on it. Everything else is at The Overhead Wire. Find me there on social media. Thanks for joining us at Mondays at The Overhead Wire. Thanks to our generous patrons for sponsoring this week's podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Talk